Good afternoon and welcome to our British Water Thought Leadership Series, Talking on Water. My name's Mark Fletcher and I'm the current chair of British Water. I have with me today Mike Keil, Chief Executive of the Consumer Council for Water, or CCW, and he's kindly agreed to an interview which we're recording to share across the water sector. So, good afternoon, Mike.
Hiya, Mark. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Just in terms of the outline for the interview, I'm going to ask a few sort of general questions and Mike can then share his thoughts. And we might have some follow-up for clarification, but we'll see how it goes. I hope you're all suitably relaxed so we can make a start. So first of all, Mike, your vision for CCW given the increasing focus on affordability and unpaid challenges. Over to you.
Yeah, our vision for from CCW's point of view for the sector, not just for unpaid, but beyond as well, it's got kind of three main prongs to that. The first one, and you won't be surprised at any of them, a trusted sector is the first one. You know, we know that trust is not where we'd like it to be as a sector. We measure it every year in a tracker survey, and it's lowest point since we've been measuring it, and that's like 13 years ago. So trust is a real issue there. We want to see, again, not a surprise, fair and affordable bills. We know that people are struggling to pay their bills. More people than ever are struggling. A survey from December 2023, so a really fresh survey, showed that it was just under 1 in 5 households are saying that they are struggling to pay their water bill. So that equates to over 4 million households. That's over 10 million people. So we know that that is an issue. But fairness goes alongside that, because there'll be people who can pay their bill and don't have a problem with, affordability as such, but they're seeing their bill as unfair because they are hearing the news, they're seeing bad news stories about the sector, and it's affecting their perspectives. And also they may have actually directly got poor service. So they won't see their bill as fair either. Slightly different than affordability. And then the final one is obviously a sector that has got resilient services. And we are there at the forefront of climate change in the water sector. And as a consumer body, we have been challenged. Well, why are you interested in building reservoirs? And you flip the coin on that. It'd be ridiculous not to. What? So why would a consumer body not be concerned about running out of water? We're very concerned, And of course, surface water, flooding people's homes and businesses, and environmental damage. We know that these are issues that consumers really care passionately about. So in terms of the vision, trusted sector, fair and affordable bills, resilient services.
Yeah. So the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change has said more than 90% of the impacts of climate change affect the water cycle. I'm not sure that people know that or realise just how much we are at the sharp end of, or the leading edge in many ways, of climate change. So what do you think are the sort of current challenges that need to address much more collectively by the sector from a customer or consumer perspective?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's quite a long list here, but I think there's so many dimensions to unpack when you ask a question like that. Yes. I'll stick to two. You'll be pleased.
Okay, no, that's good. Yeah,
and one I've already mentioned, because it's trust. There's so many dimensions to trust, and there's no magic formula. And as a sector, we need to really work together on this, because if we keep rowing as a sector about who's to blame for poor environmental performance, then we're not going to move on. We need to go, okay, it's not great. No one's pleased that we are where we are, but nonetheless, we are where we are. So we've got to work together to tackle this. And I think there is a real cultural aspect that underpins all of this, and we've got to be much more upfront in the way we talk about it, not just to ourselves in the sector, but also to people. And from our point of view in a consumer body, you look at the way the sector talks. it's not very accessible. Even when there's opportunity, say, to go on the radio and talk about it, it feels like we're talking to a regulatory audience rather than a consumer audience. And we're not really going to be building trust if we can't even talk to people using short words that people actually understand.
So I agree, and there's something about that, a common narrative that everybody's on board with, and that doesn't mean, it doesn't insult people's intelligence to simplify the language just so that everybody understands what we're talking about, because I think everybody should have an opinion and a view and be able to engage in the discussions. So, next question. Water companies, they're increasingly being asked by Ofwat to take steps to encourage their customers, that's household and non-household customers, to reduce water consumption. What's your view on it? How easy is it to influence behaviour? And, what might that look like from your perspective?
Yeah, and I think obviously that is one of the challenges, because climate change as a sector is something we've got to deal with, and behaviour change is a huge part of our sector response, and one that's often overlooked because engineers like to build things, and I get that, but that's not the only solution in time. So as you say, Mark, the question on behaviour change is a really good one, because it is hard. And I do think when it comes to this type of thing, we're very quick to go, I know, let's just have one big campaign and that'll do it. And you kind of go, yes. No, I guarantee you one big campaign is a great way to waste tons of money. Yeah. Because we don't know what if someone said, I'm going to give you, 10 million quid, Mark, to have a big campaign, or you gave me 10 million quid, I'd go, bloody hell, I don't know what I'm going to do with that. Yeah. So, I mean, I think we need to take a much more nuanced approach where we go, do you know what, let's acknowledge it. It's hard. We don't know what to do. But the answer is don't do nothing and don't put your eggs in one basket. Yes. Try lots of things, but do it in a very measured, controlled way, and actually do experiments. Be willing to take risks, measure it properly. So I think this is a huge opportunity actually for the sector, because in doing so, you're reaching out to those people that you serve, those consumers. So actually, while you're talking to them about behaviour change, you can talk to them about what you're doing to improve the local environment. What are you doing to help them with affordability issues? So actually, while you're having those conversations, you can actually have multiple topics that you can bring up. So actually, there's a massive opportunity there. We've been trying to push this through our podcast on Waterfall, which we've got a lot of episodes now. And the whole point of that is about water savings, combating climate change, protecting the environment. And that is the theme. That is the core message. And it's meant to be for not for the sector, it's meant for people. But we need people in the sector to help promote it and be guests and talk about things that really matter. And the whole kind of behaviour change stuff comes up quite a lot. And it is clear that it's tough. But we need to stay focused on this. And I mean, it's encouraging that Ofwat in this price review are proposing the Water Efficiency Fund. And we think that's a good start. We think the problem's bigger than £100 million problem, because that's what they're proposing for that. If you compare it to the building new resource side, 100 million, whilst it sounds a lot, it's a drop in the ocean, isn't it?
It's a drop in the ocean, yes.
Yeah. So it's a good start, but I think that concept could be broadened and become a bit more strategic as well, with more strategic oversight. We've been pushing this concept called ARID, which is accelerating reductions in demand, which is it's not dissimilar from the Water Efficiency Fund, but it's kind of got that much more strategic approach that sits on top of that. So think of rapids that currently exist, but for demand side. And I think that, I mean, that wouldn't solve it, by the way, Mark. That's would be a step in the right direction.
I like the idea of that. I've seen things like events like Cape Town and their Day Zero, and how initiatives have gone in, some of which there's a bounce back and people stop doing the things that they do. But some things were affecting permanent change. And I think there is an element of learning from things that people have tried and what's worked. And also learning what hasn't worked, but just sharing that in a real. But if there's simple steps that people can do, sharing what those simple steps might be, so that we can help to make some progress. A small amount of permanent change is far better. a small amount but permanent is far better than a large amount of short duration and then you just bounce back into it. So I think that's good. So how do you what do you think the supply chain's role is in all these future challenges? You know, customers, well, our bills are going up. I wonder how much they connect that with what they see in the street, or a reservoir being built, or whatever it might be. You know, what do you think is a supply chain? Should they be engaging with people and customers more? You know, do they have a role to play in not reassuring customers, but I mean, customers can make up their own minds, but it's value for money or it isn't, and why they're doing it. What do you think?
Yeah, there's never been a more important time for the supply chain, to be honest. We know that obviously supply chain, I don't think people, you know, your average punter doesn't really appreciate the role that the supply chain and third parties play currently in delivering the services. You know, the essential services would not run if it wasn't for the supply chain and third parties helping out in the delivery of projects. And I do, and also coming up with new ideas and innovating. So I think there is a kind of hidden role there, which from a customer point of view, I suppose they don't really need to know though. Yeah. As such, but I think there's tons of untapped potential in the supply chain, because I think we often will look to supply chain for, say, engineering solutions, or run my go and run my call center or whatever, right? And that's great, don't get me wrong, but I think there's some of these topics we've already touched on, you know, so demand side measures, innovation, the cultural side of it as well. Actually, the supply chain will have tons of ideas how to do a lot of this stuff. But I think we sometimes can be a little bit one-dimensional in how we engage and reach out to supply chain. And I think we need to be going, let's throw open the doors much more than we currently do. Because I don't believe we will tackle these challenges by just looking at the same way we currently do things and using the same people that we currently do. And I mean, I do think as well, when you talk about topics like trust and the reputation of the sector, that the supply chain is vital. I mean, I've had two very recent experiences which sort of show the good and bad of it. So I had a meter replaced. Someone knocked on the door and said, "Oh, I'm coming to replace your meter." They had a high-vis vest on with a water company logo that wasn't my water company picked off, so you could see that it had just been picked off. They were an unmarked van. The only reason why I let them do it was the company had sent me a card a month before saying, on this day, this person will come. So I knew it was legit because I'd got the card. But I was left going, this. If you had just been, you know, Mrs. Miggins, who hadn't been paying attention, you'd be like, this is so dodgy. But then we had a leak quite near the house, right outside the school. I rang up the company. Literally a few minutes after it started, and they said, we already know about it. Someone was there with 20 minutes. They'd run the head teacher. They'd done the traffic management. I mean, it was brilliant. I think all of that was delivered by, you know, third parties through the supply chain. And you go, that's really good.
I agree. And often that intervention, and when that happens, to me, it's how you do it. Having spent a lot of time working in Yorkshire, I've seen really quite dramatic interventions that have affected people, and people bringing out trays of cups of tea for the workers. And it's how you do it. The fact that we're all trying to get a better service for everybody. It's not going to be perfect all the time, but I think sometimes the way in which you can establish a bit more of a relationship where it's less about everybody blaming each other, and let's pitch in and try and get better solutions. I think that's important.
But that's such a good example you're giving now, Mark. Yeah, that people will be seeing the field force, and actually because they've been engaged, they're happy. They're wanting to help them. They want to support them, and that really speaks to that point on culture. Because actually, a supply chain who's really nailed it can actually raise the bar. So it's not.
I agree.
It doesn't have to be like contracted in, you know, you must behave like this. Actually, you know, the supply chain actually doing the right thing and doing it really well could actually raise the bar for the company, not the other way around.
I agree. And some of those are real basic fundamental things about the culture of the companies and the way they want to do work, which is great. Changing the subject a little bit, thinking about the role of CCW in safeguarding our environment. It's a really important issue for customers, we know that, and helping this idea of delivering social contracts within communities, that's people and organisations working together. Well, what's your take on that?
Yeah, it's an interesting one because there's all social contract, I think, is a term that, I mean, I think is a helpful concept, but it's one of these ones, it's back to what we were talking about earlier, Mark, that if you just talk to someone in the streets and social contract, they'd go, yeah, whatever, yeah, what are you talking about? And I think there's even confusion within the sector because some people think of it as very basic. Look, I'll provide a service, you pay your bill, and you also respect their assets. So don't chuck things down the toilet that you shouldn't. And it's as simple as that. Whereas there's others who have a much more broader view of what a social contract means. And it's the stuff we've just talked about. Plus, it's can you do stuff to enhance the community? Are you looking after your customers who are vulnerable in some ways? Do you recognise there's a wider obligation that you are providing an essential service? Oh, and you're a monopoly provider, so your customers can't walk away. So you need to respect them in a different way than if you were just a company that wasn't monopolistic and you could then choose provider. So I think there are different interpretations, and the different interpretations sometimes can lead to a bit of confusion with people. I mean, nonetheless, I do think that if a company wants to rebuild trust and the sector wants to rebuild trust, and we're CCW are part of this, part of trying to rebuild that trust, that I do think we have to embrace all that a social contract means in its wider sense.
I agree in its wider sense, and I think of there's real environmental outcomes that people can relate to. If we said, and did you know now you've got salmon in your rivers or otters or kingfishers or something like that, where people see beyond just their individual, but this wider influence that a company's doing that you personally benefit from, that you may be affected by, but that it's also contributing to where you walk your dog or where you canoe or where you fish or whatever it might be. We're all in that community space contributing and working together, and that's that broader sense of I think what that sort of contract might be.
Yeah, and I think you're spot on, because if we're going to turn it around, and I think we can, by the way, I don't think the sector I absolutely don't think it's a lost cause. I think the sector can turn it around, but it will require us all rolling up our sleeves, getting stuck in, and stop sort of infighting and just recognise that there's a big task in hand, get stuck in. And the environment performance, going back to your original question, is so vital to that, because I think there is a risk, right, with the next AMP period coming up. So you've got, we don't know the final outcome yet, but you're talking significant increases in bills.
Yeah, people
do value the environment, and you said that yourself, Mark, a minute ago, and people recognise that they do get the need for investment. So you kind of go, oh, that's good. They recognise the need for investment, and actually they're willing to pay for investment. The risk is that a lot of money gets spent in the next AMP period, but people then don't actually see a difference or recognise that difference. And people want to know, and quite rightly, that they're not getting ripped off. They want to know, people want to know they're getting value. So I think it's so important that going hand in hand in the next AMP period is that in the delivery, it's so clear what is being done. And so that people will recognise that, and then you're right. And it's not just about your water sewage services directly. It's about as you said, where you walk your dog, where you play with your kids, that side of things as well.
So those outcomes, it's easy to say, the corporate outcomes or the regional outcomes. I think if you could bring those down to what's local to me, what does it mean to me living in the road I live in, near to the stream I walk by, or the bit of coast I live by, and what something that's tangible. The other thing, in a sort of changing climate change, what do you think are the main challenges for customers? Is it understanding the uncertainty? What do you think? Because I'm sure you get coming back, well, this climate. I think we're past the point where we think that it's been debunked and all the misinformation has gone now, and it's happening and people can see it. But what do you think that does in terms of bringing challenges for customers?
Yeah, You're absolutely spot on. The debate has moved on, so you're not getting people just challenging the notion of climate change. And actually, on one of our podcast episodes, number 61, which was about climate change and turbocharging the water cycle, had Professor Richard Allen on, who is a professor at Reading University of Climate Science, and he is one of the authors of. He was the lead author of Chapter 5 of the IPCC report. You know, the big international.
Yes.
You know what they are, Mark.
Yeah.
Sorry,
No. For everyone listening, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. So the people who tell us what the climate's changing to, yeah.
So this guy is, I went to uni with him, and so he was, he was on talking about climate change, and we asked him the same question about, well, very similar question, how do you communicate this? How difficult is it? And he was saying, actually, what you've got now is the opportunity that people will, if you can get a bit of space with people, you can explain it in ways they understand. And I found that quite striking because, yeah, you don't have to win the battle about, oh, is the science right? It's now about going, what does it mean? As you say,
Absolutely.
What are the impacts? What does this mean for you? And I think that's one of the areas that we really have to focus on, because if we're saying change your behaviour in terms of the amount of water you use and what you're watching, what you flush down the loo, etc., you've got to understand the why. If you don't get the why, you're not going to. It's not going to stick. So
absolutely, you're on the money there.
Yeah, so that's a big challenge. And then the second challenge related to climate change is actually the costs of it too. So I said people get the need for investment, and I think, and most people in the research shows this, most people do support bill rises if they deliver things that they want, but you've got to have that support to go alongside it, hand in hand, for people who can't afford their bills, because we know the impacts of climate change tend to affect people in poverty, but also the direct cost of the water bill will affect them disproportionately as well. And that's why we've got to have much more comprehensive support for the people who can't afford their bills. And I think that future investment needs to go hand in hand with fit for purpose support. And I think that is a challenge because, as we know at the moment, it's just a patchwork of different social tariffs for each water company. We need to do collectively, we need to do better than this.
Yeah, I agree. It's music to my ears what you're saying there, and I do think collectively there is that challenge. I'm not sure why we're competing. I think there's more value from collectively working together to common purpose than there is in competing, but that's just a personal view, so that's the caveat. So in terms of what can British Water do to help you and help customers? Is there any space that you think, well, get your members around this? It might be what we've discussed about the way in which we engage, the culture in which if we could promote that we're all working together to a better environment or to the most affordable service. But what are your thoughts in that space?
Yeah, I think with the collaboration, clearly, I mean, it's stating the obvious, but it is a two-way street on this. It shouldn't just be driven by us sitting there going, actually, give us some ideas. It's got to be a two-way street. And I think as a sector, we do need to get better at collaboration. And I think because you've got the agility of the supply chain, I think the ability to sort of take ideas and actually make things happen and oil the kind of slightly more stodgy wheels of say very big water companies or people like Ofwat or ourselves. I'm saying, actually, it's about how can we use the supply chain as catalysts to make things happen? Because I want to know who. So I had a really great chat just this week with the people behind the Get Water Fit pages and the initiative, the engine that sits behind that as well. And it was really, really useful, and hopefully we can forge a collaboration in that space. And that was great, and that was a really good example of just making some space to be inquisitive. What can they do for me, and what can I do for you? Because I'm pretty sure that the supply chain might look at CCW and go, well, I don't really know what they do. So I'm not going to try and engage with them. And I'm sure we look at the supply chain and go, ooh, maybe with a bit of suspicion, ooh, they're just out to make money. Well, actually, I don't think that's fair characterization in either direction.
No, I don't think so. And indeed, this interview is intended to start bridging some of the gaps and get us all looking at the sector from different perspectives. We've had the Ofwat economic regulator perspective, the environment perspective, and we've had the drinking water quality perspective. So customers are really important. CCW is a really important organisation, and I think it's really important that people first know that you exist, and also how to connect and engage. So I think, and a lot of your answers are going, I think, a long way to helping inform everybody across the supply chain. Is there anything else you'd like to add to our members? We've got a, and I really appreciate the way in which you've responded in a really constructive way. But anything you'd like to share with us to sort of finish off from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I just think collectively we need to get better at that collaboration, and you've done some of this, but I mean, I know you're a very straight talking guy anyway. But we need to. I think we need to do in terms of getting better at collaboration. I think we just need to call out stuff that we see as blockers and probably just go, let's deal with this in adult to adult way. So we get this a lot as a consumer body. People kind of go, if we think we're going to work with you, and they'll say we want to work with you on these topics, but then when push comes to shove, they don't necessarily, because companies sometimes do just want to keep things to themselves. And I do think there's a kind of fake feeling of competition, particularly now when people are writing business plans, that you kind of go, oh, come on, and then there's a tendency to go, well, Ofwat have created this. And I don't think they have. I think there's a bit of a misinterpretation. So I just think I'd like us to get better at collaboration and calling it out. If we're seeing those blockers, just have that conversation about it, because by doing that, that's how we'll get better at it. And when I think calling out, I don't mean in a finger pointing way. I just mean let's just say what we see on this stuff and go, why is this not working, and why can't we be better at this? So this whole kind of, I don't want to share. What's behind that? What is sitting behind the we don't want to share our great idea with you? How do we be much more open about our innovation here? And the other thing, my kind of final point, and I firmly believe this, Mark. If we do not collaborate, we will fail. Right? We won't be able to deliver water savings. We won't be able to do nature-based solutions. How could you do a nature-based solution really without collaborating? It's just
and you're never going to build trust if you don't collaborate. If you don't get to know people, well, at the end of the day, take the organisations away, and it's people dealing with people. And I think I'm a bit more direct. I'm a bit more northern, right? But I know all my neighbours. I lived in the south for years, and I didn't know any of my neighbours. So there is something culturally. There's something we've got to work on, but. We do have two of these, and we have one of these, and I do think we can call out what isn't right, and let's celebrate what is, right? Because there's an awful lot of good things that are happening that I think have been lost somewhere over the recent past. But that's been a very enjoyable and informative session. Thank you very much. I really welcome your willingness to engage, share your thoughts, ideas and concerns and suggestions. We wish you every success in your role. And if there's anything we can do at British Water to help in that, we'd like to. But that concludes our session. It's a wrap. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
Mike Keil.